Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Tuesday, May 26th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The first American COVID-19 death was on February 29th. Now, 87 days later, we are approaching 100,000. That is among tonight's headlines, and locally, this is the third straight day without a death in the county. 85 new cases are reported, and when it comes to business, more restrictions are being lifted. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman wraps up today's developments.
We are entering in to the unknown, the untested, and we're going on a journey together.
With many parts of the state now allowing dine-in for restaurants and in-person retail sales, Governor Gavin Newsom says get ready to see more positive cases. As
you have more mixing, you have more opening of the economy, that's inevitable. But that's not in and of itself an alarm bell.
Today, Newsom announced that barbershops and hair salons can reopen. Guidelines say stylists and customers need to wear face coverings while physically distancing as much as possible.
We're not even out of the first wave of this pandemic. People are talking about the second wave. That's many, many months off. The reality is this pandemic has just begun. It hasn't ended.
Over the weekend, the state announced churches could once again hold in-person services, but with guidelines severely limiting capacity. Newsom says guidance for summer camps, childcare facilities, and schools is coming soon. As the state moves to lessen restrictions, it's up to individual counties to decide when to move forward.
More and more responsibility, more and more accountability now being placed on the counties and their health directors.
Currently, we are maintaining the federal and state metrics. However, the next 21 days are essential to maintain our progress.
The holiday weekend kicked off Friday with health officials closing down popular bar and restaurant El Prez in Pacific Beach. But during the holiday weekend, San Diego police say they issued no citations to people or businesses for violating new rules.
I would say by and large, we're doing a really good job as a region, and we just want to continue that.
On Saturday, though, the Port of San Diego Harbor Police cited Flagship Cruises for restarting their boat tour operations. Flagship argues they aren't operating as a charter business and will continue their bay tours. But county health officials made it clear today that Flagship is not allowed to run tours under the current health order.
They're simply not covered. And if they continue to operate, they're going to continue to be cited.
Health officials say we may have already peaked in terms of cases here, but if people don't follow current guidelines, we could peak again. There have been no COVID-19 associated deaths reported over the last few days, but health officials say that's due to a lag in reporting from the holiday weekend.
We anticipate that we will see increased number of deaths tomorrow and continuing in the week.
County officials Tuesday also moved to allow one-on-one instruction for exercise and sports once again. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
In California and across the country, all 50 states are now in phases of reopening, and already nearly half are showing a spike in new cases. More now from Camila Bernal.
New York is back. We're reopening.
The trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange back in business, but with new precautions. Traders have to physically distance, wear masks, and sign a liability waiver.
It feels like your first day of school.
Neighboring New Jersey also looking ahead to reopenings, allowing outdoor graduations with social distancing procedures in place beginning July 6th. And professional sports teams are allowed to return to training and even competition.
With the facilities and resources they have to meet the demands of public health, we felt we could take that step forward.
The White House now urging Americans to listen to health officials' recommendations as people across the country defy distancing measures.
Everyone, while you go out, let's keep cognizant the recommendations of the CDC.
In Arkansas, a second peak.
We increased our testing. We increased our radar system so we know what's coming in advance, and I attribute it to that.
In Missouri, St. Louis County issuing a travel advisory after people packed into this pool party. In New Jersey, defying the state's closure orders, worshipers also packed into the Solid Rock Baptist Church. Now expecting a citation, the pastor says they're taking every precaution.
Everyone in the auditorium had a mask on. There was a touchless entry. We took temperatures.
Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
And churches across California can now reopen with restrictions following new guidelines released by Governor Newsom. But a lawsuit against the governor from a South Bay church is continuing. KPBS reporter John Carroll explains.
It was the news many people of faith had been waiting for weeks. Churches across California can now reopen, but with restrictions. Church buildings can only welcome back enough congregants to equal 25% of their church's capacity, or 100 people, whichever is less. The Roman Catholic Diocese of San Diego plans to restart Sunday Masses on the 14th of June, and they don't have any issue with the governor's rules. Diocesan spokesman Kevin Eckery spoke to Midday Edition today.
Well, actually, they make good sense because, frankly, they were all included in the work we've been doing for the last several weeks, planning on the reopening.
The South Bay United Pentecostal Church sued Governor Newsom over the weeks-long prohibition against services held in church buildings, so you might think that now, with a reopening plan in place, church leadership here would no longer have a problem. Problem not solved here at South Bay Pentecostal. Pastor Arthur Hodges says the governor's reopening order for churches simply doesn't go far enough. The problem, Pastor Hodges says, is that even with limited reopening, churches are still being discriminated against. Hodges was turned down by a local judge, and then late Friday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals also ruled against him. So now the case is being appealed to the Supreme Court.
Restaurants and retail and shopping malls, 50%. Factories, no restrictions on how many can be in a factory. Other industries, no restriction. Offices, for example, no restriction. So again, churches are being singled out with a higher restriction than anyone else.
Hodges says his church has set up the most complete safety protocols in place anywhere, going beyond CDC guidelines. That includes a plan to go through security, where parishioners must answer a variety of questions, then a temperature check and mandatory hand sanitizing. Hodges also says the church building has been thoroughly sanitized. The point, he says, is that there are no such strict measures at the places that get to open to 50% capacity. Still, not only Roman Catholics, but other churches say they'll follow the governor's guidelines. A pastoral letter from all Episcopal bishops across California says, in part, "For now, we will not regather in our church buildings, but will continue to attend church virtually in our homes, greeting each other via technology and loving God and our neighbor. We will continue to protect, serve, and advocate for the most vulnerable among us." But Hodges says there needs to be a uniform ruling, and that can only come from the Supreme Court.
We don't need to go through this again. If the Supreme Court would give some guidelines here, this would help all of us going forward.
The church's case is now with Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan, who could stay the Ninth's decision and allow South Bay Pentecostal to reopen as it sees fit. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Our partners at iNewsSource have found that the coronavirus pandemic hasn't stopped San Diego police from ticketing the city's homeless residents. Here's investigative reporter Cody Delaney with more.
An iNewsSource analysis of police citation data from mid-March shows police officers have more than doubled the number of tickets issued for illegal lodging compared to the same time last year. That ticket is largely aimed at homeless people. After the city turned the San Diego Convention Center into a shelter, the ticketing started to decline, but it still continues. Police Captain Scott Wall says some ticketing is necessary and points to the homeless deaths during the 2017 hepatitis A outbreak.
20 people died on the streets of San Diego because of this unsanitary, very preventable environment. The way you prevent it is you don't allow it to exist. And so we don't have that happen here.
On a recent evening, I spoke to Vernon Wellington, who police ticketed in March. He lives downtown next to the freeway and doesn't see the need for tickets.
Why? Why are you going to punish somebody because they're sleeping on the streets? You understand? That don't make no sense.
City officials want people like Wellington to accept shelter at the convention center, and so far about 1,200 have. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Cody Delaney.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. For the first time, Twitter is labeling false claims made by President Trump with a fact check. Tweets made today about mail-in ballots in California and the potential for voter fraud redirect to news articles that debunk the president. The labeling comes as Twitter faces pressure to rein in how President Trump uses the platform. And in recent days, he has voiced wild conspiracy theories about the death of a former staffer who worked for news commentator Joe Scarborough. While major parts of the economy are reopening amid relaxing health measures, that's not the case along the border. Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us just how drastically the situation has changed and how long we can expect it to remain that way.
For 3 years, the Trump administration has altered long-standing policy towards asylum seekers and migrants along the southern border. Each new policy cut down the legal pathways people have for reaching the U.S. to declare asylum, but none quite put an end to the system that's been in place since the end of World War II. But on March 17th, the United States announced it would be turning back all asylum seekers along the southern border, regardless of their country of origin. Within a few hours, they would be returned to Mexico in an effort that the Department of Homeland Security said was to stop the spread of the coronavirus pandemic.
This is unprecedented in its blanket nature and its scope.
Hiroshi Matsumura is a law professor at UCLA who specializes in immigration law.
And I think this administration has tried mightily through much of its tenure to reduce the number of asylum applications, in effect to make it harder to apply for asylum. And there are different ways it's done that. But the bottom line is that this coronavirus situation has given, I think, the administration an opening to essentially close the border to asylum cases in a way that it was, I think, trying to do, but doing it very imperfectly before.
DHS said it had authority to close the border to asylum seekers because of an order from the Center for Disease Control, allowing DHS to ban entry to the U.S. to anyone they believe will spread disease. This isn't the first time the U.S. has used illness as a justification for changing immigration policy. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was part of a racist backlash to a smallpox outbreak in San Francisco.
The use of public health reasons as pretexts or opportunities for more broad-based restriction, I think those kinds of developments run pretty deep in American history as far back as the beginning of federal immigration law.
But this recent closure of the border has yet to be challenged in court, and Matsumura believes that the Trump administration can't unilaterally close the border to asylum seekers based on CDC statute.
It's a quarantine statute. It's not a deportation statute. It's not a kind of immigration control statute.
Public health experts have expressed skepticism that the turnback policy stops the spread of coronavirus, especially as the pandemic hit the United States well before it spread to Mexico and Central America. Earlier this month, acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf visited San Diego to commend agents that were carrying out the turnback policy.
So the CDC was very clear with us, with DHS and with CBP, as we needed to make sure we did not house those individuals in our facilities, both for our workforce protection, protection of our DHS officers, protection of the American people, and protection of other migrants. So we've been very successful at doing that over the past roughly 2 months.
Wolf said that 80% of migrants were returned to Mexico within 2 hours. The same day Wolf spoke in San Diego, the Trump administration announced that the turnback policy was now extended indefinitely, subject to 30-day reviews. At the same time, asylum seekers sent back to Mexico under the Remain in Mexico program have seen their court dates in the U.S. moved back well into 2021.
People are absolutely desperate on many levels. They're desperate for information because the court schedule keeps getting pushed back further and further, and they don't have a real way to understand what is happening or when their next court date has been moved to.
Nicole Ramos is an attorney with Al Otro Lado, a legal organization based in Tijuana that advocates for asylum seekers. Since the turnback policy, the organization has begun to focus more on humanitarian relief for asylum seekers stuck in Tijuana during the pandemic. They're raising money for prepaid debit cards to give to asylum seekers who need help. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to devastate both the economy and public health systems of both countries, barriers between the two continue to go up. Here in the Otay Mountain Wilderness, the first new border barrier in decades is being built in San Diego County. It will very possibly stay here for decades to come, much like many of the policies towards asylum seekers during the pandemic, built during sickness and maintained during health. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, as the U.S. approaches a grim milestone, fighting to get back to some version of normal. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Tomorrow, Barona will be the latest local tribal casino to reopen. The company provided this video to KPBS, and it shows some of the measures taken to reduce potential exposure to COVID-19. And that includes required facial coverings, temperature checks, a ban on smoking, and a limit on just how many people can be on the gaming floor. Barona, located just north of Lakeside, has been closed for 2 months. It will open its doors tomorrow at 10 a.m. San Diego public libraries have seen a spike in online service, but for those who prefer a book in their hands, this is the news they've been waiting for. 11 branches opened today for contact-free curbside pickup. We stopped by one of those locations, the Malcolm X branch in Valencia Park. Those with existing holds for books will be notified, and new holds will begin processing on June 1st. As of now, people cannot drop off books, and due dates are being extended.
Currently not taking books in, so the items that people pick up, they'll hold on to until we have that protocol set so that we can know that it's safe to bring those books in and circulate them to other people.
Other library branches with pickup service include Rancho Bernardo, La Jolla, Mission Valley, and Logan Heights. We have the full list right now at kpbs.org. The class of 2020 at Chula Vista High had a day they will never forget. The graduates showed up today to find the names of every senior painted on the football field by an award-winning artist. The unique tribute was a surprise as students arrived to pick up their caps and gowns.
I thought for a while that we were gonna have nothing. I see other schools like take parties, do graduations. As long as we did something. My parents are a little sad because I had 2 brothers. They both did the whole graduation. They always threw a party after, big party celebration. Me, we're gonna have a little celebration, but it won't be as big as a deal. We're gonna have a graduation, but at the end of it, we still graduated, so I'm glad at that.
Students also got to take class photos. School officials praised the graduates, saying they have shown so much strength and resiliency, and they missed out on so much due to the COVID-19 closure. Well, we congratulate them. It was a hot day for those graduates and for neighborhoods that experienced a power outage. In the Ocean Beach area, 10,000 customers lost service for several hours. SDG&E was working to get it restored. With more on the heat, Mark Mancuso has your forecast.
No big changes to our weather headlines. Stays very hot in the interior sections. Along the coast, we have our shallow marine layer, so some night and early morning clouds. It'll be warm, but the real heat's in the interior. And by Friday, we'll start to see some changes, some cooling along the coast and in some of the valleys here. Deserts will probably take until Saturday. As we check out our advisories, we still have excessive heat warnings out in the desert areas. Temperatures soaring well above average with this weather pattern of the strong high pressure overhead. Temperatures good 10 to 15 degrees above average. Daily records challenged here in the interior. And here along the coast, a little bit cooler. Tonight's low in Oceanside around 60. Escondido 58. El Cajon at 61. We'll see some clouds coming back in later at night. Borrego Springs, a balmy 76 tonight. Now for tomorrow, another hot day in the interior. It'll be sizzling here. Temperatures will be rivaling record highs. It'll be warm near the coast, but the interior, that's where we're really baking. As we take a look at temperatures, 110 Borrego Springs, Campos at 93, El Cajon's 92, and Ramona at 91. As we take a look ahead, the heat dome is still over the southwest on Thursday, but we're keeping an eye on a big upper low that'll be arriving here late Friday and into Saturday. And with that, we'll start to see a cooling trend. Taking a look at the coast, next couple of days, morning clouds, afternoon sun and warm. And then we'll start to see some cooling coming in on Friday. As we check out the inland areas, still very warm, but Friday into Saturday, noticeably cooler. And the mountains stays very warm, but by the end of the week and the weekend, it's pleasant. And in the deserts, it's very hot. Then we start to see a little cooling there by Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
There are now more places to get tested for COVID-19 in San Diego's rural communities. The first is in Julian at the county library. Tomorrow, a testing site will open at the old San Diego County Fire Station in Pine Valley. Testing locations at libraries in Valley Center, Borrego, and Potrero will open later this week. People must make an appointment if they want to get tested. CAL FIRE and the county are working on adding more locations and urge people to follow their social media platforms for future announcements. It's a big piece of the puzzle in deciding just how quickly society can get back to normal. Contact tracers play a vital role in laying out how the virus is spreading. Krista Faria shows us how this can be a tough job.
Salt Lake County Health Department, this is Mackenzie.
Health investigator Mackenzie Bray follows a script that she knows all too well.
I'm just following up on your COVID-19 test results. Do you have a couple minutes?
The person on the other end of the line has tested positive for the coronavirus.
Has the hospital informed you of that? They had it? Okay, yeah, so they did come back positive.
Bray is among an army of health professionals and volunteers working as contact tracers, one of the most important roles to guard against a resurgence of the virus.
Okay, so you have another name?
While some countries have devised national approaches, in the U.S., states are having to create their own programs as businesses reopen. Some health officials estimate that as many as 300,000 contact tracers would be needed in the country to effectively mitigate the spread.
Please call me as soon as you can.
In Salt Lake County, about 130 contact tracers act as part interrogators, part counselors.
That's okay. I know you're going through a lot.
Many calls take 30 minutes or more as they meticulously go through a list of questions on printouts. On the wall, a stark reminder of what's at stake. But not everyone is forthcoming or can remember who they may have exposed to the virus.
Any other exposures that you're aware of? Any other people that you've been around?
I get people that lie all the time. I try to get as much information from the beginning, but it's just not always the case.
Others are grateful for the outreach. Anessa Archuleta was on the receiving end of Maria DeCaro's calls during her 14-day quarantine.
I just remember thanking her and telling her how much we truly do appreciate it and how nice it's been to talk to her over that time.
When you do this 10, 12 hours a day, it's catching up, so. And it's nice to get those positive reactions from people that are very grateful that they do see, the purpose of what we're doing and trying to, protect the community and stuff.
But DeCaro doesn't have time to reflect before she makes her next call.
What's your last name?
Krista Fourier, Associated Press.
If you are fans of the puck, then you're in luck. The National Hockey League is hoping to be back in action. Commissioner Gary Bettman announced today that fans can expect teams to return the ice this summer. The league will implement a 24-team playoff format, the bottom 7 teams being left out of the tournament. A start date and locations are uncertain, but today the NHL commissioner said Las Vegas is being considered as a hub. NASA is feeling more confident it will be able to put on quite a show tomorrow. As the weather outlook improves, a mission to send astronauts to the space station is almost ready for launch.
Our country has been through a lot, but this is a unique moment where all of America can take a moment and look at our country do something stunning again, and that is launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil.
This would be the first human space flight launched from the U.S. in nearly a decade. 2 astronauts will ride on a SpaceX rocket and capsule. It's a test to see if the private company can be used for future flights. And if all goes according to plan, the launch will take place at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time at Florida's Cape Canaveral. For those who are ready to fly, security at airports will look a little different due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Melissa Rainey explains.
If you haven't flown since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, things at the airport are definitely different. But it's not just the practically empty arrival and departure halls that you'll notice. The Transportation Security Administration has implemented changes at checkpoints. When you come up to the first TSA agent, you will no longer hand them your boarding pass. Instead, you will scan and hold it yourself as they do a visual check. Don't make security dig through your stuff. Since food sometimes needs extra inspection, fast-track this process by having them separated from your carry-on. Take extra time when packing to make sure you don't have any prohibited items in your bags. One change, due to COVID-19, TSA will allow you to bring one hand sanitizer bottle up to 12 ounces in your carry-on. While online, you will notice efforts to keep space between travelers and TSA agents. TSA agents will be wearing masks, and travelers are encouraged to do so as well. You may be asked to adjust or remove it during screening. These latest updates will go along with changes that airport security has already implemented. For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Melissa Rainey.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.